Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a seismic discovery that is fundamentally reshaping how geologists and everyone living on the West Coast must think about earthquake risk. Forget everything you thought you knew about the dreaded big one coming to the Pacific Northwest. We've just learned that the worst case scenario isn't just one massive earthquake, it's two massive earthquakes coming to the Pacific Northwest. We've just learned that the worst case scenario isn't just one massive earthquake, it's two massive earthquakes hitting nearly simultaneously. We are talking about the terrifying possibility that a monster quake on the Cascadia Subduction Zone could almost immediately trigger a second major rupture on the notorious San Andreas Fault. This isn't science fiction anymore, it's solid science backed by thousands of years of deep-sea geological data. The big one is officially a twin threat, and the implications for major cities from San Francisco to Vancouver are staggering. Understanding the Pacific Coast's tectonic dance. To understand this new threat, we need a quick refresher on the geology of the Pacific Coast. The western United States sits on a complex, dynamic network of tectonic boundaries. Up north, off the coast of Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, we have the Cascadia Subduction Zone. This is where the Juan de Fuca plate is diving beneath the North American plate, forming a powerful megathrust fault. When this megathrust shifts, it generates the really big one, an earthquake capable of reaching magnitude 9.0 or higher, along with devastating tsunamis and massive landslides. The last known full rupture of Cascadia happened in 1700. South of Cape Mendocino in California, the system changes. Here, the North American plate and the Pacific plate slide past each other, creating the San Andreas Fault Zone. This fault line is infamous for generating massive quakes like the devastating 1906 San Francisco event. The San Andreas is basically California's giant, grumpy zipper. Geologists have long studied these two separate, enormous fault systems. The thought was that the Cascadia event was one catastrophe and the San Andreas event was another separate catastrophe. Now, new research suggests that these two fault systems may actually be synchronized, dancing to the same destructive rhythm. An accidental discovery rewrites the rules. This groundbreaking conclusion came about thanks to what sounds like a classic geological blooper reel moment. Marine geologist Chris Goldfinger and an international team of researchers were out on a research expedition in 1999, aiming to drill deep-sea sediment cores along the Cascadia margin to look at past earthquakes. Late one night during the expedition, a graduate student entered the wrong coordinates. Oops. When the sun came up, the team realized they were about 90 kilometers south of Cape Mendocino, squarely in the domain of the San Andreas Fault. Dr. Goldfinger admits he was pretty hot about the navigational mistake, but decided, well, let's take a core here. That accidental core, pulled from the submarine Noyo Canyon off the California coast, contained a secret. The sediment layers, representing 3,000 years of geologic history, included deposits called turbidites. Turbidites are essentially underwater landslides triggered by large earthquakes, leaving distinct layers of coarse sediment at the bottom and finer material on top. However, the researchers noticed something weird. Many turbidites in the Noyo Canyon core and later in the Cascadia samples appeared in pairs or doublets. This was an unusual feature. Imagine opening a layer cake and finding that two layers of frosting were deposited simultaneously. The hidden link revealed. When the team radiocarbon dated these doubled layers up and down the coast, they found that more than half of the turbidites north and south of Cape Mendocino were deposited at the same time, within the error margins of dating. This strongly suggested a common cause that simultaneously shook both fault systems. After eliminating other possibilities, the light bulb went on. The doublets were recordings of sequential quakes. They concluded that the first fine-grained unit of the doublet was a turbidity current set off by a massive Cascadia megathrust earthquake. The second, coarse, sandy deposit on top was caused by subsequent movement on the nearby San Andreas Fault. It's an upside-down, layering pattern that tells a story of cascading disaster. The Cascadia quake shakes the entire region, triggering a turbidity current, and then shortly after, the stress transfer causes the San Andreas to rupture, triggering a second, distinct turbidity current right on top of the first. The crucial, terrifying detail is the timing. While in most historical instances it is hard to separate the two ruptures, the researchers saw evidence in some deposits that the second unit of the doublet was laid down within minutes or hours of the first. This means the entire US Pacific coast from Vancouver to San Francisco could experience a major dual earthquake nearly simultaneously. Dr. Goldfinger commented that we're used to hearing the Cascadia big one being a catastrophic huge thing, but it turns out it's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario involves both faults going off together, overwhelming multiple major metropolitan areas at once. The $289 billion California catastrophe. While the synchronization research focuses on the link between the northern San Andreas and Cascadia, we already know the sheer destructive power the San Andreas can unleash on its own. It's important to recognize that the San Andreas itself is capable of a massive state-spanning rupture. Previous modeling once suggested that the 800-mile San Andreas fault line could only rupture in isolated sections. However, updated models like the Uniform California Earthquake Rupture Forecast version 3 UCARF3 now indicate that the entire fault could hypothetically rupture all at once, potentially enabling a major earthquake to span the north-south divide. A hypothetical magnitude 8.3 quake running the length of the San Andreas could result in catastrophic damage. Estimates suggest damage to a stunning 3.5 million homes throughout northern and southern California. The estimated reconstruction cost alone for this epic quake is a whopping $289 billion. Even a slightly weaker magnitude 8.2 quake is forecasted to damage $2.5 million homes and cost $183 billion. The geological community recognizes the possibility, even if these full-length ruptures are incredibly rare, perhaps occurring only once every 2,500 years. USGS researchers stress that we must realize we are dealing with an interconnected fault system. So, if the Cascadia megathrust gives the San Andreas a nudge, those California forecasts could become tragically relevant very quickly. The Cascadia M9 threat, already devastating. Even without the San Andreas kicking in, the Cascadia Subduction Zone presents an immediate and profound threat to the Pacific Northwest. Seismologists project a 16% to 22% chance that the Cascadia earthquake will hit Oregon in the next 50 years, potentially reaching a magnitude of 8.7 or more. The likelihood of a partial rupture, resulting in a magnitude 7.4 earthquake or more, is even higher, with a 42% chance in the next 50 years. A catastrophic magnitude 9.0 Cascadia earthquake would cause violent ground shaking along the northern California, Oregon, and Washington coasts, immediately generating a massive tsunami. Coastal communities, due to the proximity of the fault, may have as little as 5 minutes of warning between the end of the ground shaking and the arrival of the first tsunami waves. In Northern California's most impacted counties, Del Norte, Humboldt, and Mendocino, tsunami wave heights are estimated to reach between 16 and 49 feet in Crescent City and up to 39 feet in Eureka-Humboldt Bay. The consequences of this one event are staggering. Almost 1,000 lives could be lost and 780 people injured just due to tsunami inundation in the 3 counties. Roughly 24,000 households could be displaced. conventional response efforts would be completely overwhelmed. This scenario, CTs in simultaneous crisis now, superimpose the Cascadia M9.0 catastrophe onto the new twin threat scenario. If both major fault systems rupture close together, as historical evidence suggests happened at least 3 times in the past 1500 years, the result is an overwhelming emergency situation. Dr. Goldfinger pointed out that an earthquake on one of the faults alone would draw down the resources of the whole country. If they both rupture together, you've got potentially San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver all in a severe emergency situation in a compressed time frame. Imagine the emergency operations coordination for that. You can almost hear the 911 switchboards melting. The consequences would extend far beyond casualties and immediate structural damage. Critical infrastructure, transportation, energy, telecommunications, water systems would be severely disrupted. Buildings will shift and collapse. Utilities will fail. Communities will be isolated, accessible only by air or water, increasing delays in response and stabilization operations. Lessons from shakeout when the San Andreas strikes alone. To appreciate the scale of simultaneous failure, we can look at detailed planning scenarios for the southern San Andreas. A hypothetical magnitude 7.8 earthquake on the southern San Andreas, the shakeout scenario, was studied by over 300 experts to inform emergency planning. This single fault event posits 1,800 deaths and 53,000 injuries requiring emergency care. The total economic loss for the single San Andreas event was estimated at $191 billion, roughly twice the loss estimated for Hurricane Katrina. The largest single cause of loss in this scenario wasn't shaking, it was fire following the earthquake. In the shakeout scenario, about 1,600 fires ignite, requiring fire department response. This overwhelms the region's total firefighting capability, especially because the water supply system would be severely impaired by pipeline damage and the loss of electric power. Approximately 200 million square feet of buildings could be destroyed by fire alone. Talk about adding insult to injury. Furthermore, lifelines fail universally. Hospitals lose 2/3 of their beds in some counties. Water supply is lost for days to weeks due to massive pipeline breaks and loss of power for pumps. Oil and gas pipelines rupture and explode at fault crossings, hampering repair efforts for other nearby lifelines. Telecommunications are overwhelmed. If this is the scale of a single M7.8 event, imagine what an M9 Cascadia quake combined with a secondary San Andreas event would look like. Planning your escape and your career. For geologists, students, and professionals in earth sciences, this synchronization revelation introduces a new higher level of complexity into seismic hazard models and risk assessment. We must now factor in the cascading risk, particularly in Northern California, where the two faults converge. This requires a deeper look into paleoseismology, utilizing techniques like deep-sea coring that led to this discovery. For everyone else, including those of us who just enjoy geology from a safe distance, the message is stark. Preparedness must now account for a dual disaster hitting the entire West Coast. As Dr. Goldfinger suggested, if Cascadia goes off and you are in the Bay Area, you might want to drive east immediately. Of course, that's easy to say when the highways aren't already buckled and the gas stations haven't lost power. Oregon is already taking proactive steps, recognizing the inevitable threat of the Cascadia megathrust, directing the state to immediately earthquake-proof new large buildings and retrofit existing state agency buildings by 2060. The reality is an M8.9 earthquake in the region is inevitable. The key takeaway is this: we are dealing with an interconnected, dynamic Earth system. The two biggest threats on the West Coast are not working independently. They might be working together, potentially setting off an emergency that would paralyze multiple major metropolitan areas simultaneously. So update your earthquake kit, review your evacuation plans, and maybe, just maybe, don't buy that seaside property just yet. Because as one geologist summarized it so well, we should live every day like it could be the day of the big one. Or should we now say the bigger one? Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next video.
Welcome to my channel, where you'll find over 2,000 videos on geology, geochemistry, AI, and many other subjects. If you like what you see, help us grow by subscribing, liking, and sharing this channel.
I think these videos are brilliant, and I'm sure you will like them too. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell.